Ever had one of those days where something just, bang, completely unexpected happens? You suffer a loss, maybe an injury, and your first thought is probably after the initial shock.
Can I sue someone for this?
Exactly. Like maybe a careless driver hits your car, or, something you bought just falls apart. Not because of some defect you knew about, but just carelessness.
It's a very common reaction, isn't it? Especially when there's no contract between you and the person who caused the harm. The law needs another way to sort out who's responsible.
And that's precisely what we're digging into today. We're doing a deep dive into negligence. It's a really fundamental legal idea that kicks in exactly when there isn't a contract, but someone's lack of care has clearly hurt someone else.
Yeah. Our goal here is to cut through some of the, let's say, the legal jargon. We want to give you a really clear picture of the key things someone has to prove to show negligence.
We'll look at why this law even exists, some pretty famous old cases.
Yeah, some surprising ones.
And we'll use a straightforward example like a car accident to make it all feel a bit more real.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. When we talk about negligence, it falls under the umbrella of torts. Now, that's a word people hear.
Right, but what exactly is a tort? And why is negligence one?
Well, simply put, torts are civil wrongs. They're harms or injuries one person suffers because of another person's actions, or sometimes inaction where the law provides a remedy, usually money.
Okay.
And negligence popped up to fill a really big gap. For ages, law was heavily focused on contracts, on agreements. But what if you suffer a loss and there's no agreement connecting you to the person who caused it?
Yeah, what then?
Historically, well, often you were out of luck. No contract, maybe no way to sue. Negligence created that pathway.
Right, so if I hire you to paint my house,
Yeah.
and you mess it up, that's a contract thing.
Exactly.
But if you're just driving along, maybe texting or something, you crash into my car, there's no contract there. That's where negligence comes in.
Precisely. And the fascinating thing is, this whole area really crystallized around something pretty weird. A snail.
Ah, the snail in the bottle. Donoghue v. Stevenson. 1932, right?
That's the one. It's genuinely one of the most important cases in all of tort law, I'd say. Mrs. Donoghue is out with a friend. The friend buys her a ginger beer. It's in one of those dark, opaque bottles.
Can't see inside.
Right. She drinks some, pours out the rest, and finds, the decomposing remains of a snail.
Yeah, I remember reading about this. And she got sick.
Very sick. Nervous shock, gastroenteritis. Pretty nasty.
Okay, but the legal problem was she didn't buy the drink herself. Her friend did.
Exactly the issue. No contract between her and the manufacturer. Her friend had the contract. So under the old rules, it looked like she had no claim against the maker of the ginger beer.
Seems unfair. So what happened?
Well, this is where the House of Lords, the highest court then, made a truly groundbreaking move. They essentially created a new legal principle, the idea of a duty of care.
A duty of care.
Owed to your neighbor. And this wasn't just your literal next-door neighbor. It was a broader concept. This allowed Mrs. Donoghue to successfully sue the manufacturer. It fundamentally changed things.
That neighbor idea sounds huge. We definitely need to unpack who counts as a neighbor.
We will. It's central.
But first, let's set up that hypothetical we mentioned, just to keep things grounded. Let's say Harry is driving along and another driver, Alex, hits his car.
Okay.
Harry ends up with, say, a broken leg, can't work for a couple of months. The immediate question is, can Harry sue Alex for his medical bills? The wages he lost, maybe pain and suffering?
Yeah, and on the face of it, it seems obvious, doesn't it? Harry's hurt, Alex caused it. Seems fair.
But it's not that simple in law, is it?
No, the law needs structure, predictability. You can't just sue for every little thing. The courts would grind to a halt. So there are specific hurdles Harry has to clear.
Right, which brings us to the core of proving negligence. You need to establish 3 key things, right? Like 3 pillars holding up the claim.
That's a great way to put it. 3 essential elements. For Harry to succeed against Alex, he must prove, first, Alex owed him a duty of care.
Okay, duty.
Second, Alex breached that duty of care.
Breach.
And third, Harry suffered actual loss or damage because of that breach. There has to be a direct link.
Duty, breach, causation to design. The damage caused by the breach.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it's worth mentioning quickly, even if Harry proves all 3.
Alex might still have a way out.
Yeah.
Or at least reduce what he pays.
Exactly. There are defenses, but we'll get to those later. Let's start with pillar 1, that duty of care. After Donoghue, the snail case, the definition of neighbor was pretty wide, wasn't it? Something like, person so closely affected I should have them in mind.
Yeah, persons so closely and directly affected by my act that I ought reasonably to have them in contemplation as being so affected. It sounds incredibly broad, like potentially everyone could be my neighbor.
It was very broad. Revolutionary, yes, but potentially unmanageable if left unchecked. Imagine the sheer number of lawsuits.
But the courts had to refine it.
They did. Over time, through later cases, Ans v. Merton was one, but the big one really is Caparo Industries v. Dickman in 1990. These cases introduced a more structured test, essentially adding layers to the neighbor principle.
Making it harder to establish a duty.
Making it more specific, perhaps. They brought in two key ideas, sometimes framed as three parts, but fundamentally boiling down to proximity and fairness.
Proximity and fairness. Okay. What do those mean in practice?
Proximity means there needs to be a sufficiently close relationship. Not always physical, but close enough that it's reasonably foreseeable that carelessness by one person could harm the other.
Right, foreseeable harm.
And then fairness. It must also be fair, just, and reasonable for the law to impose that duty in that particular situation. This gives courts flexibility to say, look, even if harm was foreseeable, it's just not fair or practical to impose a duty here. Maybe for policy reasons.
Okay, that makes sense. It adds a necessary filter. So let's bring it back to Harry and Alex and their car crash. Does Alex owe Harry a duty of care under this refined test?
Oh, absolutely. It fits perfectly. Proximity.
Well, Alex drove into Harry's car. Can't get much closer physically.
Right. Foreseeability. Is it foreseeable that crashing into someone might injure them?
Definitely. That's a primary risk of driving carelessly.
And fairness. Is it fair, just, and reasonable to expect drivers to owe a duty of care to other road users?
Yes, clearly. Society relies on that. So, Alex owes Harry a duty. Pillar 1. Check.
Pillar 1 established, so now we move to the second. Did Alex breach that duty?
How do the courts figure that out? Is there like a checklist for careful driving?
Not quite a checklist, but there's a standard. The courts ask, what would a reasonable person have done in the same circumstances?
The reasonable person. Who is this mythical figure?
Not mythical, just
Yeah.
average. Prudent, not perfect, not superhuman, just ordinarily careful. If Alex's driving fell below the standard of what this reasonable person would have done, he's breached his duty.
And I guess what's reasonable changes depending on the situation.
Absolutely. It's flexible. For instance, if the claimant, the person harmed, is known to be particularly vulnerable, maybe a child, or someone with a disability, the reasonable person is expected to take more care.
That makes sense. What else affects the standard?
Lots of things. Was the defendant following common practice in their industry? Usually that suggests they were being reasonable, unless the whole industry practice is maybe flawed.
Okay.
Was there a social benefit to what the defendant was doing? Think of an ambulance driver, maybe speeding slightly to save a life. A court might cut them some slack, provided they weren't reckless.
Right, balancing risks and benefits.
Exactly. Also, how high was the risk? If an activity is inherently dangerous, the reasonable person takes extra precautions. And practicality matters too. Were precautions ridiculously expensive or difficult compared to the risk?
And what about professionals, like doctors or engineers?
Good point. They're held to a higher standard. Not the reasonable person, but the reasonable professional in their field. What would a competent doctor or engineer or lawyer have done? Often measured against professional guidelines.
So back to Harry and Alex. To see if Alex breached his duty, the court asks, did Alex drive like a reasonable driver would have in those conditions?
Precisely. Was it foggy, raining? Was the speed limit lower there? A reasonable driver adjusts.
So if it was pouring rain and Alex was still doing the speed limit and not leaving extra stopping distance?
That might well be unreasonable, below the standard. You'd need evidence, of course, witness accounts, maybe accident reconstruction.
Okay. So for our example, let's assume the evidence shows Alex wasn't driving reasonably. Maybe he was speeding on a wet road. So breach established. Pillar 2, check.
Pillar 2 done. Duty, breach. But sometimes the facts are just so obvious, aren't they? Where negligence seems almost self-evident.
You mean like that Latin phrase?
Res ipsa loquitur.
The facts speak for themselves.
Exactly. It applies in rare cases where basically the accident wouldn't normally happen unless someone was negligent, and the thing that caused the harm was totally under the defendant's control.
Like the classic example of a barrel falling from a warehouse window onto someone below.
That kind of thing. Or a famous case, Mahan v. Osborne, involved a surgical swab being left inside a patient.
Oh dear.
Yeah. The court basically said, look, swabs don't just appear inside patients. This happening strongly suggests negligence. It shifts the burden slightly, making the defendant explain how they weren't negligent.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've got duty and breach Sorted for Harry and Alex. Now, the third pillar, loss or damage as a result of the breach. This is about the connection, right? The chain of causality.
Absolutely critical. Harry has to prove that Alex's breach directly caused his broken leg and lost wages. It's not enough that Alex was careless. That carelessness must have led to the specific harm.
And the main test for this is the but-for test.
That's the starting point. It sounds simple. But for the defendant's actions, would the claimant have suffered the harm?
So, but for Alex speeding on the wet road, would Harry have broken his leg? If the answer is no, then causation is likely established.
Generally, yes. But it can get complicated if there are multiple potential causes. Then the claimant usually has to show the defendant's action was the most likely cause, the material cause.
Is there a case that illustrates the but-for test failing?
Yes, a well-known one is Barnett v. Chelsea and Kensington Hospital. A night watchman felt unwell after drinking tea, went to hospital A&E. The doctor on duty was negligent, didn't examine him properly, sent him home.
Okay.
He died a few hours later from arsenic poisoning. Turns out the tea had been poisoned before he even went to the hospital.
So even if the doctor had treated him properly,
He probably would have died anyway. The arsenic poisoning was too advanced, but for the doctor's negligence, he still would have died. The doctor's breach didn't cause the death, so no liability for the death.
wow, that's stark. So even with clear negligence, if it didn't cause the outcome, no liability. What about remoteness? You mentioned that earlier. Harm can't be too far-fetched.
Exactly. This is another check on liability. Even if you caused the harm but for your actions, you're only liable for types of harm that were reasonably foreseeable.
Foreseeable harm again. Like the Wagon Mound case.
That's the classic. Oil negligently spilled from a ship, the Wagon Mound, into Sydney Harbor. It spread. Some welding was happening on a nearby wharf. Sparks fell and ignited some cotton waste floating in the oil.
Causing a big fire.
Yes, damaging the wharf. But the court found that while spilling the oil was negligent, the type of damage, fire damage from that kind of oil on water, wasn't reasonably foreseeable at the time. So the ship owners weren't liable for the fire damage. It was too remote a consequence.
So foreseeability limits the scope of the damage you're responsible for, not just whether you owe a duty in the first place.
Precisely. It stops liability stretching out infinitely for every bizarre consequence.
Okay. And what if something else happens after the initial negligent act that contributes to the damage? Can that break the chain?
Yes. That's called novus actus interveniens, a new intervening act. If something unexpected happens, outside the defendant's control, it can break the chain of causation.
Like what?
Could be an unreasonable act by the claimant themselves, or the actions of a third party become the real cause, or even a completely unforeseeable natural event like a freak lightning strike hitting the already damaged car. The defendant's action has to remain the main operative cause.
So back to Harry and Alex. If, say, after Alex hit Harry, a third car came along and crashed into Harry's car again, making the injuries much worse.
That third driver's actions could potentially be a novus actus, breaking the chain from Alex's initial negligence to those worsened injuries. Alex might only be liable for the damage up to that point.
Or if Harry did something really reckless himself after the accident that made his leg worse.
Potentially, yes. It depends if Harry's actions were truly unreasonable or unforeseeable. But let's assume for our scenario, none of that applies. Alex's negligent driving is the clear, direct cause of Harry's broken leg and lost wages.
Okay, so Harry's established duty, breach, and causation. It seems like he's won. Full compensation time.
Almost. But remember those defenses we mentioned. Even with negligence proven, Alex might have arguments to reduce or eliminate his liability.
Right, defenses. What's the first big one?
Volenti non fit injuria.
Latin again.
It means no injury is done to one who consents. Or, more simply, voluntary acceptance of risk. If Alex can prove Harry knew about the specific risk and willingly accepted it, Alex might not be liable at all.
How do you prove someone accepted a risk? Like signing a waiver for bungee jumping.
That's an express acceptance, yes, or it can be implied by conduct, like maybe getting into a car with someone you know is obviously drunk. You're arguably implying acceptance of the risk of their bad driving.
Okay, but for Harry and Alex, Harry didn't agree to be crashed into.
No, Volenti almost never applies to standard road accidents. You don't consent to other people's negligence just by being on the road, so that defense won't help Alex.
What's the other main one then? The one that might reduce damages?
contributory negligence. This is much more common. It means Harry himself was partly at fault for his own injuries.
How so?
Well, maybe Harry wasn't wearing his seatbelt. Alex is still liable for causing the crash. But if Harry's injuries were made worse because he wasn't belted in...
And he contributed to the extent of his injuries.
Exactly. The court would apportion blame. They might say Alex was, say, 80% responsible for the harm, but Harry was 20% responsible because of the seatbelt.
So Harry's damages would be reduced by 20%.
Precisely. It reflects the shared fault. It doesn't let Alex off the hook, but it adjusts the payout to be fairer if the claimant also didn't take reasonable care for their own safety.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've covered a huge amount: duty, breach, causation, remoteness, defenses, from snails to car crashes.
We have. And the takeaway really is how this area of law, negligence, provides this vital framework for fairness when there isn't a contract.
It holds people accountable for carelessness.
But balances that against reasonableness, foreseeability, and the claimant's own conduct. It tries to strike a balance, ensuring people can get remedies for real harm without opening the floodgates to, well, endless lawsuits for every little mishap.
It really underpins so much of how we interact, ensuring there's some legal responsibility even without formal agreements.
Absolutely. It's evolved to fill a really necessary space.
So, reflecting on all this, what's a final thought for our listeners to chew on?
Well, it makes you think, doesn't it? How do these principles, duty, breach, causation, apply to situations that are emerging right now? Think about AI, autonomous cars, online interactions.
New technologies, new ways of interacting.
Exactly. What new kinds of neighbor relationships are forming? Where might new duties of care be needed? Or maybe where are the lines becoming blurred? It's something to keep in mind as the world keeps changing.
Definitely something to ponder. How does this old law adapt to new realities? Fascinating stuff. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.